if we adopt the same habits that right-wing people do in policing, excising their freaks, et cetera, we're only going to reproduce at best, a male chauvinist left, a Western chauvinist left. You know what I'm saying? And that's where we get to the Voshes. That's where we get to the Destinies. You know what I'm saying? And there is we're trying to recruit. One of the reasons why I keep connection and keep an eye on you is because in many ways you represent like the average guy, average white guy. I think, I don't know if I said it to you, but I've said it before, like Joe Rogan, what he used to, now he's getting more and more right wing. But I used to say with confidence that if Joe Rogan were the worst white guy in the world, the world would be a much better place.
Yeah.
If we could stop everything at where
I'll
Joe
accept
Rogan,
that very, questionable framing.
Right.
Now, I speak on behalf, as the representative of the average white guy, I have to,
right.
defend my people.
And this is like 20,
sure, I get your point.
Maybe 2019, 2018 Joe Rogan, 2025 Joe Rogan.
Sure, Bernie Sanders Joe Rogan.
Yeah. Like I'll give him 2 years away from Bernie Sanders. But my point is still like that would be a much better place because the extremes of how bad it could get would only be able to go so far. Mm-hmm. But even that is still very Western chauvinist. You know what I'm saying? And if we get to that same policing standard, we get to that same excising the freak standard, the only people that will, and as we're also recruiting the Yous and the Joe Rogans of the world, we're going to end up just reproducing the thing we have already.
Okay, then here's the paradox. So, I'll use the male chauvinist left, let's say Vosh, okay? Because I've already argued with Destiny before. I have debated Vosh as well. But just a male leftist chauvinist, whatever, insert whoever the viewer watching this hates the most. You need to excise, that person becomes the freak. How do you excise that person on the left?
We've tried so hard.
That's what I'm saying. This is what.
No,
okay, but you recognize the importance of that.
I have a real answer.
Okay.
Who's bigger now, me or Vosh? Who's bigger now, me or Destiny? You do that by focusing on the.
Hold on. It's not a clear answer on Vosh. Is kind of. I think most of his audience are kids, and then Destiny, he's immune to everything at this point.
But even before he got blown up with his stuff, I had outgrown Destiny. At least in terms of subscriber base. Now, of course, that's not the metric to judge influence, yada yada yada, completely. But it does speak to the ethos I'm talking about. Instead of making, and I learned this. I made a video called "Leftist Infighting Almost Killed Me" about 2.5 years ago now.
I think I saw that one. Yeah.
And it was me kind of reflecting on mistakes I had made, like reflecting on what you're talking about. Because to me, the ableist, working out as ableist people aren't really the freaks. The freaks are Vosh and Destiny. You know what I'm saying? And I was putting in a lot of effort to excise them. Let me just finish this point. Okay. I was putting in so much effort to excise them. I was making videos, tweeting at these motherfuckers on a regular basis, et cetera. And at some point, aside from the fact that it was stressing me the fuck out and getting on my nerves, I also realized it just wasn't actually effective because of the nature of how this is.
Sure.
And so what I needed to do was get so much bigger and make people that I really fucked with, whose politics I agreed with, so much bigger that there's just less room for them to be
fair enough
to do fuckery.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. And yes, and to be clear, that's a good point. It depends on what you mean by what are the tactics by which we excise the left or the right, whatever side you're on.
Right.
It's like because absolutely you have the counter effect, which is if I keep like on the right, keep. Like Jordan Peterson, in my opinion, is a perfect example of this, where like people would call him names and he would like reply to every fucking 5-follower anonymous account. And he would come on podcasts and be like, well, the problem is if you allow psychopathy to go unpunished, then society falls apart. It's like
your Jordan Peterson impression is horrible.
My Jordan Peterson's not good at all. I don't. Yeah. Listen,
maybe because I'm
far too alpha and testosterone to have such a high Kermit the Frog voice, right? But that's a perfect example of like that backfires. So it does depend on what you mean by excising the freaks. I think when I think of excising the freaks on your own side, it means being, I don't know, I'm thinking about this out loud, of like whatever your brand is as like a political influencer, let's say, if I'm just thinking about this individually, like no one would accuse me of being like a fundamentalist Christian. I call myself a cultural Christian. I believe in the value of religion. I'm sympathetic to Christian nationalism, much to Soy Pill's fucking
there we go.
bitch shit.
I'll be with you for a second, and then you say
Fine.
something like that.
Okay, there we go. That's my point.
No, I don't even want to get into it.
Agreed. All right. Agreed. Just so you know, you're platforming someone who platformed a Christian nationalist. So just yeah.
I mean, like that's
canceled. But my point is, no one who, anyone can see a random clip of me and just know me or think they know me or whatever. But like, no one who watches me even occasionally would think, well, this guy's a fundamentalist, because virtually in anytime I'm talking about the right or the left, I explicitly cite fundamentalist Christianity as the example of going too far on the right, right? But I still am. So I think when I think of exercising the right, and to be fair, this is projection. I'm describing what I do and thinking that it's the right way to approach it for everyone. Maybe not, but clearly articulating why you disagree with the side that people would most likely associate you with. And I specifically remember that because the very first conversation I had with JJ McCullough, that very forgettable Canadian YouTuber, the very first conversation I had with him, he said something like, you do genuinely have, he said it's like a split the baby type attitude where you don't just say, well, of course we're against racism, but look what the left does. It's like, no, not just against like right-wing racism. Here's all the fucking ways in which it's ridiculous and nonsensical and anti-Christian or something like that, right? And I think that's what I mean by exile, is like making it so clear that you are not aligned with that side, often by being the best critic of it. Right. So like Donald Trump, if I was advising Donald Trump, just pretty practically, whether you like him or not, when the Proud Boys thing came up, he should have just, instead of saying stand back and stand by, which is like, oh, okay, well, maybe he actually likes them, right?
Likes us, right?
But let's say hypothetically, in whatever universe, right, real or otherwise, he was actually anti-white supremacist. He could have very easily just been like, the Proud Boys, you mean those losers in their parents' basements who sit online posting swastikas? Those are losers. Our movement is made of winners. We don't hang out with losers, fat, white losers in their mom's basement. It would have fit his brand. It would, and that would have been a meme. It would have been, and then all the criticism that he's a white supremacist. Just
and he could continue to do white supremacist adjacent shit.
Well, fine, fair enough. I'm just talking practically from the meme point.
And so you're correct.
Thank you. We'll cut it there, ladies and gentlemen.
Put me back on screen.
Look at that. I did. That's you.
Oh, fuck.
That's called synchronicity.
Oh, Lord. That is amazing that it would stop. All right, let's try this. So the thing you're describing, though, is fundamentally right wing, which is exclusion, dominance, hierarchy. So the right wing gets to excise their freaks, as you said. The right wing can do that easily, confidently, and it will never backfire on them because that is built into their core. That those organizing principles that does exist within left wing, left wing spaces.
It's still there. It's not emphasized as much.
It's still there. Like there's order, there's discipline, there's all those things. Depending on even like anarchists are very organized, but it has to. Depending on the situation and the context, it can't operate in as simply and as what's the word I want to use here? Uncritically as you're talking here. You know what I'm saying? Because there's consequences for, like you said, one of the first things you said with Donald Trump there was branding. And so when you do that, when you become the left-wing guy, the left-wing force, the left-wing community, whatever, that has rigid policing standards for the least of your org because the
male chauvinists are the freaks in this example.
Right. But the male yes. Okay, so actually you're fucking up the whole way I was going with that. But I was more talking about
because you're thinking people. Yes.
I was talking about that specifically.
Okay, fair. Okay, fine.
But even you're still right though, even with the male chauvinists. By me trying to, and by so many people, like I hate, there's a certain point where I was literally behind the scenes telling people, stop making videos about Vosh. And I'm not going to put that too much further out there, but I was telling people, you're not actually going to get rid of his influence and limit his influence.
Yeah, it's the opposite effect.
Like it has the opposite effect, yes. And his fans are ridiculous and will hound you and stalk you and harass you on Twitter, right? But what I didn't realize then, but I realize more now, is that we were trying to exert a dominance framework to fix a left-wing like community issue, and that is not. That just
fair enough.
That just didn't work, you know?
Right. And hence my point about you are clearly articulating your boundaries, but not necessarily, and I agree going after individuals is not necessarily the thing, but at least the ideology.